To Spain now, where tens of thousands of people have rallied in the city of Valencia to protest the official response to the floods that killed more than 220 people. They want the regional government leader to resign. Dozens are still missing over a week after torrents swept vehicles and people away.
Anger and despair unites people here in Valencia as they demand the resignation of regional leader Carlos Marzón. More than 220 people died in Spain's worst flood in recent decades.
We're protesting because of all the mismanagement and because they didn't warn us in time. Luckily, we're still alive, but many others are dead, and they could have been saved.
They must understand they failed and we deserve better. But unfortunately, we have completely incompetent leaders. We need a fresh start. Too many are dead. Too many have been abandoned. And more than 10 days after the floods, they are still abandoned.
There were even calls for officials to face criminal charges. Some of the protesters unleashed their anger on police officers, who responded using their batons. Rallies were also held in other cities across the region and the country, and more are being planned. Many residents in the affected areas are too busy to join the protests in Valencia's city centre. Sara Prieto's parents have lost everything in the floods. Luckily, they were able to escape at the last minute. But they have friends who are still searching for missing family members and who feel abandoned by the authorities.
There's no coordination. I have the impression that there's no one at the government level managing any of this. It's complete chaos.
Mountains of garbage keep piling up on the streets around Valencia, and authorities are warning of the spread of infectious diseases.
The red letter R means that this car has already been searched for dead bodies. But almost 2 weeks after the devastating floods, the situation in the area remains chaotic, and the cleanup work is progressing very slowly. And with each day, the anger of the people at the government's crisis management keeps growing.
While people feel left alone by the authorities, there is massive solidarity amongst those affected. Every day, these volunteers serve around 500 free meals.
If we didn't help ourselves, they would let us die. Not far from here, where mostly elderly people live, it's even worse. There are still villages where no help has arrived at all.
With anger surging and growing demands for accountability, the disaster could yet result in political careers being swept away.
Well, let's go to Valencia now, where DW correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz is standing by for us. Jan-Philipp, great to see you. So we've seen in that report there that protesters have been calling for the resignation of the regional leader. Why is that exactly?
Protesters have demanded the resignation of all people responsible for crisis management. But yes, above all, it's about the resignation of regional leader Carlos Marzón. It's the regional government, according to Spanish laws, that is mainly responsible for emergency response in this kind of crisis. And also in the past days, renowned newspapers such as El País have published some sensitive details from inside the regional government. They claim that Marzón had an extensive lunch meeting on the day of the floods and arrived late for the crisis meeting. So this kind of news, of course, fuels the anger of the people here.
But Jan-Philipp, there's also been anger too at the general response of the government, both regionally and nationally. Tell us more.
Well, the people mainly criticize that the alerts came way too late when thousands of people had already been trapped. Also, the emergency response afterwards has been very uncoordinated and slow. Specialized units have arrived in the region now, but they arrived 5 days after the floods hit the affected areas. And I think what makes people really angry is that no one in Spain wants to take over political responsibility for the disaster. Instead, the typical Spanish blame game is taking place, in which the conservative regional government is blaming the socialist national government for the disaster and vice versa.
Right, but this is all happening, of course, as the cleanup and the search efforts are still taking place. We saw there in that report that you were in some of those affected areas. Tell us, how is the response now? What's the situation?
Exactly. I've been in the affected area several times in the past days, and people are still very, very angry that the cleanup efforts are progressing very slowly. I talked to one lady that said that she is still searching for her missing father 10 days after the floods hit, and that she has hardly received any any kind of help from the authorities. There are mountains of garbage everywhere. There is chaos. There is fear of infectious diseases spreading. The only thing that seems to work quite well is the solidarity in the neighborhoods, a lot of volunteer efforts, but people are extremely angry still.
Thanks, Jan-Philipp. We'll leave it there. DW correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz joining us from Valencia in Spain.